In Hollywood, every light hides a shadow. Every applause has a silence behind it. This is the story of those who lived between the two. Welcome to Hollywood Biographies, June 2011. A quiet morning in Los Angeles. A short CBS bulletin cut through the rush of daily headlines. James Arness, star of Gunsmoke, has passed away at the age of 88. No commotion, no lavish funeral, no poetic farewells. Just a wave of radio static drifting across the city, leaving behind a silence, like the fading echo of a horse's hooves disappearing over the hill. For many Americans, that name was more than an actor. James Arness was a memory, a face that had accompanied them through 2 decades of black and white television, through a time when America still believed that justice would prevail and kindness was worth fighting for. In millions of homes, every Saturday night, the tall cowboy riding into Dodge City became a symbol of order, honor, and integrity. Things that once felt simple, but now seem as rare as an old dream. In a world where fame is often measured by noise, James Arness lived in the opposite way. 20 years at the center of American television, 20 seasons, 635 episodes, hundreds of millions of viewers. Yet he rarely appeared on talk shows, had no scandals, made no political statements, and never chased the spotlight. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He only wanted to do what was right, every day, for more than half a century. And that leads to the greatest question of all, one that few in Hollywood have ever answered. What allows a man to remain truly honorable beneath the glittering lights of Hollywood for more than 50 years? It seems a simple question, yet behind it lies an entire lost era, a time when people still believed that morality and honor had a place on stage, and that a hero didn't need to shout to be called one. James Arness was born during wartime, came of age through America's years of struggle, and became the face of an age when television still carried a moral spirit. On screen, he was Marshal Matt Dillon, the embodiment of justice, the Western hero whose gun was always drawn last. Off-screen, he lived the same way, calm, patient, and always careful not to lose himself. Hollywood has created thousands of stars, but only a few become legends, not because of talent, but because of character. James Arness was one of them. A soldier bearing real wounds from the Battle of Anzio, he stepped into cinema not for glory, but for the chance to tell stories. An actor who never once betrayed his audience, not even for a moment of falsehood. And when his era faded away, people realized that his image, the righteous hero, did not vanish with him. It had become part of America's collective memory. There are those who come to Hollywood to be seen, and there are others, like James Arness, who only wish to be understood. Between light and silence, between fame and solitude, he chose the harder path, the path of decency. And that journey, from the battlefield to the film set, from private pain to a nation's legacy, tells us something enduring, that in a world where almost everything can be bought or sold, there are still values that can never be replaced. Every story about integrity begins in the simplest of places, home. And for James Arness, that home was a small house in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where winters were so cold that even breath turned into smoke. He was born on May 26, 1923, with the full name James King Arness. His father, Rolf Arness, was a Norwegian-born businessman, a practical, quiet man who believed in the value of hard work and discipline. His mother, Ruth Dusler, was a journalist, sensitive, devoted to words and ethics, as much as to her children. In that house, two worlds, reason and compassion, met and formed the moral foundation that James would carry throughout his life. The family wasn't wealthy, but they lived with dignity. His father taught him to respect every small task, shoveling snow, washing dishes, or delivering newspapers at dawn. His mother taught him that what matters is not what people see you do, but whether you're honest about what you do. Together, they planted in him a rare and simple seed: to live uprightly, even when no one is watching. In 1930, America entered the Great Depression. Minneapolis was no exception. Snowy streets, long lines outside relief stations. 8-year-old James watched his father leave home each morning, no matter the wind or frost, just to keep a small job at the factory. He told his son, "Never be afraid of being poor. Be afraid only if one day you find yourself working half-heartedly." That line, years later, James Arness would recall in a rare interview as his guiding principle in life. The family also had a younger son, Peter Arness, who would later change his name to Peter Graves and become the star of Mission Impossible. The two brothers grew up together, sharing everything: a bunk bed, a loaf of bread in the morning, and faraway dreams of the American West, where the sun sank over the prairie and horses ran like waves. But unlike his confident younger brother, James was shy. As a teenager, he stood nearly 2 meters tall, a height that made him stand out awkwardly among his classmates. He often stood at the back of the line, hunched in class photos, and was teased more than once as the gentle giant. No one could have guessed that this very stature, once a source of discomfort, would later define his legend. Marshal Matt Dillon, the steadfast cowboy carved in bronze. James attended West High School, where he wasn't known for grades but for honesty, diligence, and humility, qualities that made teachers fond of him. In the summers, he worked as a fisherman on Lake Superior, drifting on small boats amid cold waves and morning fog, a place where all you could rely on were your hands and your friends' integrity. In the winters, he delivered packages, wrapped newspapers, shoveled snow, small jobs that taught him his first lesson in self-respect: that no job is beneath you, only the way you do it can be. He grew up in the American Midwest, where people lived by labor and guarded their word as their honor. The men there spoke little, worked hard. A handshake was their promise, and they kept it as they would their life. From them, James learned what he would later bring to every role: steadiness, patience, and the belief that morality never needs an explanation. When asked about his childhood, James once said simply, "I think whatever good I have in life comes from my parents teaching me how to live without pretending." A simple line, but it captures the soul of who he was. A man who never needed noise to prove his decency. In 1941, when America entered the war, James had just turned 18. The tall young man left high school behind, carrying with him a wool sweater knitted by his mother and the simplest lessons of all: work hard, be honest, and never turn your back on duty. Soon after, James enlisted in the Army, beginning the journey of a soldier who carried not just courage, but the integrity forged in childhood. And perhaps it was in that small, frozen home in Minneapolis that the first spark of his honesty was lit, a flame he would never let die. In James Arness's world, integrity was never lofty or abstract. It was breath itself, the way a person keeps his back straight in the blizzard and the one thing that allows a man to look in the mirror without bowing his head. In 1943, World War II had entered its fiercest stage. Young men across America left their peaceful hometowns one by one, leaving behind wooden houses, high school hallways, and unfinished dreams. James Arness was 20 then, tall, quiet, and carrying within him the simple pride his parents had taught him since childhood. When your country calls, a man must stand up. He went to the enlistment station in Minneapolis, volunteered for the U.S. Army, and was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division, one of the most battle-scarred units in the entire military. Because of his nearly 2-meter height, Arness was designated as a landing scout in amphibious assaults, a duty so dangerous that the chance of survival was often less than half. His job was to be the first to jump from the plane or landing craft, assess the terrain, and mark safe zones for those who followed. When asked years later if he had been afraid, he just smiled and said, "Who isn't afraid?" But all I could think about then was not letting anyone behind me get hurt. January 1944, the Battle of Anzio, Italy, one of the bloodiest campaigns of the European front. The sea was gray, the sky heavy, and landing craft rocked violently under the roar of German artillery from the coast. James was among the first to jump. Within minutes, shells screamed overhead, the ground erupted, and he fell to the cold sand as shrapnel tore into his right leg. Blood filled his boot, breath grew short, but he still shouted, "Move up!" to keep those behind from stopping. When his comrades dragged him out of the shell fire, Arness was still conscious, clutching his rifle and murmuring the name of his unit, afraid they might forget him. He was taken to a field hospital in Naples, then transferred to London. Doctors said that if the wound had become even slightly more infected, they would have had to amputate his leg. James spent nearly half a year in bed, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant, the groans of men who no longer had arms or friends or tomorrows. He didn't complain. He just stared at the ceiling, and in the sleepless nights, his mind drifted back to the snowy streets of Minneapolis, where life once felt impossibly calm. When he was finally allowed to return to the United States, James Arness was not the same man. His right leg made him limp, and every change in weather brought back the dull ache of that battlefield. He was awarded the Bronze Star for bravery and the Purple Heart for his wound in combat. But to him, medals mattered far less than the faces of those who never came home. He later said, "War didn't teach me how to hate. It taught me how to value life, because I saw too many good men lose theirs." The years of recovery were a long silence. He relearned how to walk, how to stand, how to take a step, even how to smile again. Every step hurt. Every pain reminded him that life is never a free gift. Perhaps that's why, later in Hollywood, every movement of his body carried that weight. The slow gait, the steady gaze, the low voice that sounded as if every word had to cross through memory first. No one knew that every time he mounted a horse on Gunsmoke, that old wound burned again. But he never complained. To him, pain was simply part of strength. While Hollywood was busy creating heroes out of scripts and lighting, James Arness brought something else, a real one. Not because of his towering build, but because he had truly survived places filled with nothing but bullets and fear. Years later, audiences watching Dillon, the Western Marshal standing between good and evil, weren't just seeing a performance. They were seeing a man who had actually seen war. War left James Arness with a deep scar on his body, but it also carved into him an unshakable moral code: honesty, courage, and gratitude for life. Those became the roots of everything he was, in the way he treated colleagues, and in how he kept himself away from Hollywood's noise. Because once you've seen death from one step away, fame becomes far too small to care about. Years later, when asked why he never talked much about the war, he simply said, "The truly brave don't have to tell their stories. They just live differently." Perhaps that was his way of honoring those who didn't make it back, through silence. And within that silence, people understood. Some wounds never need to be hidden, because they are what make a man trustworthy. James Arness never needed to be called a hero, because he had already been one. And as if fate had planned it, that soldier would one day carry the posture and spirit of the battlefield onto the screen. Not to act, but to live out the belief that even in chaos, there is still room for courage and integrity. After the war, America returned to peace, but it was no longer the same America. The young soldiers who had crossed Europe came home carrying two things: nostalgia and emptiness. James Arness was one of them. When he left the military hospital at the end of 1945, he had nothing but a limp, a few dollars of allowance, and hazy dreams of a normal life. But how could life ever be normal again after you had seen war? His injured right leg made walking difficult, and finding any physical labor nearly impossible. He didn't talk much, just tried to live quietly in a world that had changed. A high school friend, a technician at a small radio station in Minneapolis, heard about his condition and offered to help. "We need someone to read ads, James. You've got a warm, trustworthy voice. Why don't you try it?" Arness laughed and shook his head. "I've never spoken into a microphone before." His friend smiled. "You shouted commands across a beach in Italy. You can handle a microphone." So he tried. In a small studio filled with cigarette smoke and the hum of tape machines, James Arness leaned toward the microphone for the first time. His deep, slightly rough voice rolled out. "Here's your morning weather report for Minneapolis." After 30 seconds, the room fell silent. The station manager looked up and said, "You've got the voice of someone people want to believe." That job as a radio announcer didn't just give him an income, it gave him back a sense of purpose. He once recalled, "After the war, I thought I'd lost my voice. Working at the station helped me find it again." Every morning, that voice went out over the airwaves of the Midwest. Deep, calm, steady. The voice of a man who'd seen things his listeners never would. A local stage director, after hearing him on air, turned to a friend and said, "If that man ever steps in front of a camera, the audience will believe anything he says." That offhand remark would unknowingly plant the seed that led him to Hollywood. In 1946, James decided to head west, to California, where the sky was wide and the sun seemed bright enough to erase old shadows. On the train to Los Angeles, he never imagined becoming an actor. He just wanted a job, an honest one. But fate, as always, had other plans. At first, he worked wherever he could, hauling freight on the docks, standing night guard at a parking lot. Then, thanks to his radio experience, doing voiceovers for local ads. And once again, someone told him, "You have the voice of a man people can trust." It was a simple comment, but it opened a new path. A colleague encouraged him to try auditioning for small film roles. James applied to RKO Pictures, knowing nothing about acting, only that his tall frame and kind eyes caught the director's attention. In 1947, he was cast as an extra in The Farmer's Daughter, alongside Loretta Young and Joseph Cotten. It was such a minor role that he appeared for only a few seconds, but when the director called cut, Loretta Young turned to him and smiled. "You walk like someone who's known the wind." James didn't quite understand at the time, but later he said, "I think she saw that I still carried a bit of battlefield dust on me." That same year, he officially shortened his surname from Arness to Arness, a small change, but symbolic, marking his decision to leave the past behind and begin anew. That name would later become part of American television history, but then it was just a shaky signature on his first contract. In the following years, James Arness appeared in a string of minor roles, as a soldier, cowboy, criminal, or nameless face in the crowd. None of them memorable, but in Hollywood, patience can be rarer than talent. He never complained, never asked for favors, and was always on time. A crew member later said, "He never raised his voice, but when James was on set, everything seemed a little calmer." In 1951, Arness was cast as The Thing in The Thing from Another World, a science fiction film where he played a monstrous alien. The role had almost no dialogue, just a towering, eerie presence. But his slow, disciplined movements made the creature unforgettable. Audiences didn't know who was inside the suit, but the producers did. They had found someone who could make people believe. For James, that was his first turning point. Not for fame, but because he realized that film, too, demanded honesty. One evening in 1952, destiny knocked again. He was offered a supporting role in Big Jim McLean, an anti-communist film starring John Wayne, the ultimate Western hero. Wayne noticed the tall, quiet man with the strangely steady gaze. After the shoot, he put a hand on Arness's shoulder and said, "You've got something Hollywood's missing. Authenticity. Don't ever lose it." From that day, John Wayne became Arness's unofficial mentor. He helped James land roles in several films: Hondo, 1953, Island in the Sky, 1953, and The Sea Chase, 1955. At a time when most young actors sought attention, James did the opposite. No parties, no press, no publicity. After filming, he would remove his hat, nod to the crew, and quietly walk back to his small apartment in Burbank. Evenings were spent reading or strolling the streets under the glow of theater lights, thinking, maybe I'll never be famous, but I can still do my small part well. Post-war Hollywood was noisy and cutthroat. New faces appeared daily and disappeared just as fast. But James Arness, with his slow walk and modest smile, began to stand out, not for volume, but for decency. Cinematographers said he never forgot to thank the lighting crew. Co-stars remembered that he always asked, "Are you doing okay?" before the cameras rolled. And directors discovered that, though he'd never studied acting, Arness possessed what couldn't be taught: truthfulness. In a later interview, he reflected, "I never tried to look tough. I just tried not to pretend." That sincerity convinced John Wayne that Arness was the only man who could bring the spirit of the Old West to television, a rare figure of integrity in an increasingly commercial era. Wayne personally recommended him to CBS for a new Western series called Gunsmoke. At first, Arness hesitated. "I'm not a television actor." Wayne just smiled. "You don't have to act. You just have to be yourself." It sounded like prophecy. In 1955, James Arness stepped onto the set in a cowboy outfit and wide-brimmed hat, beginning a 20-year journey that would make history. But before that door of glory opened, he was still just a man who had come home from war, walking slowly but steadily, believing that in a noisy world, kindness was the only path that endured. Some find glory by luck. Others, like James Arness, simply take time and integrity to shine on their own. In 1955, American television entered its golden age. Families, freshly healed from the war, gathered each evening around their black and white sets, where westerns retold the dream of a nation rebuilding from ruins. And among the many new series that year, there was one small, unassuming title: Gunsmoke. It was John Wayne who introduced James Arness to the producers at CBS. In a short promotional reel before the premiere, Wayne himself appeared on camera, looked straight at the audience and said, "I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine, James Arness, who will be playing Marshal Matt Dillon in Gunsmoke. I think you're going to like him." Wayne took no payment for that shoot. When CBS offered him a fee, he simply said, "I just want this man to get a chance. He's real, not a product." That sentence stayed with Arness for the rest of his life, like a promise. And indeed, only weeks later, when the first episode aired, America seemed to pause before the deep voice, steady eyes, and deliberate gait of Marshal Matt Dillon, the calm, fair, quietly compassionate lawman of the West. In an age when the world still drew sharp lines between good and evil, Dillon stood for something deeper than law: trust. He used his gun only when forced to, spoke little, worked hard, and always chose the harder path: forgiveness. Audiences saw in him what they once believed to be the true American spirit: strong but not cruel, firm yet kind, and always humble before another's pain. From its first season, Gunsmoke became a national phenomenon. Each week, more than 30 million people tuned in to watch Dillon keep order in Dodge City, over 35% of U.S. households. Across 20 seasons and 635 episodes, it became the longest-running primetime series in American history for decades. At its peak, it was more than television. It was a family ritual. Children learned to believe in heroes. Adults were reminded to keep their integrity in ordinary life. James Arness devoted nearly 2 decades of his life to Matt Dillon. Major studios offered him feature film roles with many times the salary, but he refused. "I took on Dillon," he said, "and I'm not leaving him halfway." CBS urged him to take breaks for other projects, but he shook his head. For Arness, Gunsmoke wasn't a job. It was a covenant with millions who believed in that character. On screen, Dillon protected the weak. Off screen, James Arness lived the same way. He often told the crew, "Don't do anything today that'll make you ashamed tomorrow." That simple rule became the compass for everyone on set. And indeed, through 20 years, Gunsmoke had no scandals, no stars walking out, no feuds, only a quiet professionalism bound by mutual respect. No one ever saw him lose his temper. No one heard him gossip. During breaks, he drank coffee with the lighting crew or helped the assistant director solve technical snags. Amanda Blake, who played Miss Kitty, once said, "James had a way of making people want to be better, just by being silent." The crew still tells the story of the Riding in the Rain shoot in Simi Valley. Real rain, real mud. The director wanted to postpone because Arness's old war wound had flared up, but he simply said, Let's finish it." They filmed for more than 10 hours in the cold downpour. Afterward, he soaked his swollen leg in hot water for 2 hours and was still the first to arrive on set the next morning. On screen, Matt Dillon never fell. In life, James Arness never did either, even if his legs never truly healed. Through it all, his most loyal companion wasn't another actor but his horse, Buck, his four-legged partner for 20 years. As Buck aged, the studio wanted to replace him for safety. Arness refused. "Buck and I started together. We'll finish together." He paid out of pocket for the best care and kept the horse near the studio so it would never be sent away. When Buck died after the series ended, Arness took a day off. The only day he ever missed work in 20 years. "I lost a co-star no one could replace," he said quietly. Years later, when asked why Gunsmoke had succeeded for so long, Arness replied slowly, "Maybe because Dillon is the kind of man we all still want to believe exists." His integrity reached far beyond the screen. As American television grew louder and more violent, Arness refused to let Gunsmoke lose its humanity. Once, a producer proposed that Dillon shoot a villain dead to heighten the drama. Arness declined. "If we kill him, the story ends. But if we let him live, the audience still has hope." The script was changed, and that episode became one of the season's most beloved. Gunsmoke endured not just because it made money, but because viewers could feel the truth in every glance, every gesture, every silence. Behind that glow of fame stood a quiet man. No scandals, no noise. In 20 years, he never appeared on a tabloid cover. No lavish birthdays, no displays of wealth, no grand speeches. He lived like Dillon, simple, decent, and direct. A colleague once asked, "Don't you ever get tired of being the good guy?" Arness smiled. "I don't try to be good. I just try not to be bad." By 1975, when CBS announced the end of Gunsmoke, James Arness had walked beside Matt Dillon for half a lifetime, from age 30 to 52. On the final day of filming, he sat quietly on horseback, gazing toward the horizon. The set fell silent. An assistant whispered, "You okay, Jim?" He nodded. "I think it's time this hero got to rest." A costume crew member quietly snapped a photo. In it, Arness tilts his head slightly, eyes distant, one hand resting on the horse's neck. When asked to autograph it later, he hesitated a long while, then wrote, "To everyone who believed in goodness, thank you." That photo hung in his study for the rest of his life. But for America, Gunsmoke never truly ended. The image of Dillon, the tall, steady man with the modest smile and eyes that never flinched from what was right, still lives in the nation's memory. And James Arness, a man who never tried to seem noble, became the symbol of something rare: integrity. "Integrity," he once wrote, "is not what you say, it's how you live." Even when no one's watching, there are heroes who never fall to bullets, yet quietly collapse beneath sorrows no one ever sees. After 2 decades beneath the blinding light of Gunsmoke, James Arness began facing another kind of silence. The silence of loneliness, of loss, of things that cannot be spoken into a camera. He once said, in a rare interview, "I never thought of myself as famous. I was just a lucky man who got to do what he believed was right." But sometimes, that very right thing became an invisible distance between him and the people he loved most. In the late 1940s, as a young man newly returned from war, Arness met Virginia Chapman, a stage actress with bright eyes and a confident voice. She was bold. He was quiet. She talked. He smiled. Yet his calm steadiness made her feel safe. They married in 1948 in a small ceremony in Los Angeles. Arness adopted her son, Craig, as his own, and together they had 2 more children, Jenny Lee and Rolf. In their early years, they lived in a small house in Burbank, weathering hard times together, believing that love and hard work could fix anything. Then came 1955 and Gunsmoke, bringing fame, money, and a dazzling spotlight no one could ignore. But that light also marked the beginning of the shadow. James worked 6 days a week, filming from dawn until night. Virginia stayed home with 3 children, trying to keep life normal. She was proud of her husband, but began to feel invisible in a world where only one of them was seen. She longed to return to the stage, to feel the applause again. Arness, on the other hand, wanted peace, to keep the family away from Hollywood's noise. A friend of Virginia once said, "Jim never betrayed her, but he was absent, and sometimes that hurts more than betrayal." They drifted apart quietly, no shouting, no bitterness, just 2 good people walking in opposite directions. In 1960, at the height of his fame, Arness divorced Virginia after 12 years of marriage. No lawsuits, no public quarrels, just a silent document filed at court and 2 people moving on. Arness gained custody of the children. Virginia kept working in small film and theater projects. He would later reflect, "No one was wrong. Sometimes people just stop walking toward the same sun." The tall, stoic man never spoke ill of his ex-wife. Not once. No bitterness, no gossip. To him, love, even when it ended, still deserved respect. He remained single, raising his 3 children, Rolf, Craig, and Jenny Lee. Between long shooting days, he tried to make time for them, fishing, skiing, teaching them to keep promises. Rolf would later recall, "My father never said, 'I love you.' He said, 'Don't do anything that makes you ashamed of yourself.' For him, that meant love." But the deepest pain came in 1975, the same year Gunsmoke ended. His daughter, Jenny Lee Arness, died at age 24 from an overdose of sleeping pills. No one ever knew exactly why. Some said heartbreak after a breakup. Others said she felt crushed under her father's shadow. For James, no explanation mattered. Only the silence and the emptiness that would never be filled. In a private letter to a friend, he wrote only one line: "Nothing teaches you the worth of kindness like losing someone you love." After that, he withdrew. He turned down interviews, public appearances, and questions. Not out of fear, but because he knew. There are no answers light enough to speak aloud. People said, the Western hero never cried on camera, but off-screen, he carried his sorrow like another scar, one no one could see. 2 years later, in 1977, Virginia, his ex-wife, passed away. James did not appear publicly at the funeral, but close friends said he came early, laid a single flower on her casket, and left before anyone noticed. That was how he said goodbye, simply, quietly, respectfully. In the years that followed, he spent most of his time in the mountains of Big Bear, California, surrounded by snow and silence. He fished, skied, and stayed far from Hollywood's clamor. No paparazzi, no flashbulbs, no audience, just an aging man, living with loss and the echo of old light. By the late 1970s, Hollywood had changed. A new generation of fast-paced, loud action stars had taken over. And then came an offer. How the West Was Won, 1978, an epic NBC miniseries. The role of Zeb McCahan, a weathered, gentle, tight-lipped Westerner, seemed written for him. He was no longer the lawman Dillon guarding a town, but a father trying to hold a family together in a changing world. On screen, he still moved slowly, spoke little, his eyes deep and calm. But now in every gesture, you could sense it. This wasn't acting. It was memory. When asked about it, he smiled softly. "I think Zeb and I have both seen enough. We don't need to say what's right anymore. We just need to live it." The series was a major success, both in America and across Europe. Audiences called him the last Western hero, the man who carried the spirit of an older generation, where honor required no oath and integrity needed no proof. But behind it all, James Arness remained a solitary man. No scandals, no noise, no indulgence. When a reporter once asked, "Do you ever feel lonely?" he replied, "Loneliness isn't frightening, not if you use it to understand yourself." Years passed. His hair turned silver, his walk slowed, but his integrity burned steady, like a lamp that refused to go out. In a letter to his son, he wrote, "Integrity isn't what we say when people are listening. It's how we live when no one is watching." Perhaps that was the greatest lesson the Western hero ever left behind. After fame, after loss, after silence, he still kept one thing: kindness. And sometimes, that alone is what makes a man immortal. When the stage lights fade, most who once lived beneath them are left with emptiness. But for James Arness, it was simply a quiet sunset, neither sad nor wistful, just as gentle as a breath after a long journey. After years marked by silence and loss, he returned to the screen in the early 1980s, walking more slowly now, silver in his hair, yet with the same steady gaze as ever. The Western hero had grown old, but the public was not ready to say goodbye. So Gunsmoke was revived, not as a weekly series, but through a set of special television films, tributes to the generation who had once grown up with it. In 1987, he returned in Gunsmoke, returned to Dodge, 12 years after leaving the role of Marshal Matt Dillon. When the familiar opening theme played, millions of Americans wept. On screen, Dillon was no longer quick on his feet, but his eyes were warmer, wiser. James Arness wasn't acting anymore. He was simply living again as himself. A man who had journeyed through nearly a century of America and still carried within him a quiet flame called integrity. He went on to star in Gunsmoke, The Last Apache, 1990, The Last Man, 1993, and One Man's Justice, 1994, the final chapters of the Western legend. Each role shared the same essence: an aging man standing in a changing world, still trying to do what's right, even knowing his strength was fading. In the final scene of One Man's Justice, he rides his horse toward the horizon as the sunset spreads across the prairie, an image many called the most beautiful farewell Hollywood ever filmed. Off-screen, James Arness never sought fame. He had married Janet Surtees in 1978, a woman outside the entertainment world, and together they lived quietly in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Their home wasn't far from Hollywood Boulevard, where his name had been embedded in the Walk of Fame since 1960. Yet for the next 30 years, he almost never visited it. No parties, no talk shows, no social media. He declined interviews, avoided political commentary, and shunned celebrity discussions. When asked why he stayed out of the spotlight, Arness simply smiled. "I think I've said enough. It's time to let the work speak for me." Neighbors recalled how, every morning, he would walk his dog around the block, stopping to greet each familiar face with a gentle nod. No one would guess that this tall, kind old man had once starred in the longest-running drama in American television history. He was simply Jim, with slow steps and a firm handshake. In 1996, at age 73, James Arness received the Lifetime Achievement Award, an honor he humbly accepted without making a speech. He simply rose, smiled, bowed his head, and said quietly into the microphone, "I've been lucky to tell stories that helped people believe in goodness." The entire hall rose in applause, but he quietly left the stage before the music even ended. In his final years, Arness devoted his time to his family, to Janet, to the mountains of Big Bear, where he had once found peace after loss. He answered fan letters by hand, writing slowly, signing each with blue ink. As his health declined, he created a small personal website, not for publicity, but for gratitude. On it, he posted one last message, a few months before his death. It didn't speak of his career or fame, only one simple line. "Thank you for believing in me through every story about kindness." On June 3, 2011, James Arness passed away peacefully at his Brentwood home at the age of 88. There was no public funeral, no cameras, no press. Just a quiet morning, sunlight streaming through the window, and the Western hero closing his life as quietly as he had lived it. The film world called him the last hero of Hollywood's golden age. But to those who had grown up with Gunsmoke, James Arness was more than a symbol. He was proof that integrity, when truly lived, can outlast all glory. When people look back at his final image, the silver hair, the towering frame, the kind smile, they don't remember the gun or the fame. They remember the peace in his eyes, the peace of a man who lived his entire life without ever losing himself. All heroes grow old, the closing narration says. But some heroes, even in silence, still make the world believe in goodness. When people look back on the history of Hollywood, amid all the glittering names, James Arness stands apart. Not because he ever stood at the peak of fame, but because he never needed fame to exist. He didn't chase roles to be remembered. He chose them to tell stories that made people believe in goodness. In over 60 years in the business, he was never caught in scandal, never trapped in controversy or noise. He never wrote a speech about legacy. But his life itself was a quiet lesson in honesty, humility, and the simple grace of living rightly, even when no one is watching. From the soldier who returned from war, to the Western hero, to the old man who faded into silence, every role, every step led to one truth: integrity never goes out of style. In Hollywood, where stars rise and fall like sparks in the dark, James Arness remained, calm, steady, unshaken, never needing noise to matter. People said he was the only hero audiences believed in, both on screen and in life. Because he didn't just play Matt Dillon, he lived like Matt Dillon. No judgment, no boasting, never diminishing others to appear taller. And in a world that grows more cynical every day, he reminded us that kindness still exists. It's just quieter now. After his passing, hundreds of handwritten letters poured in from across America. One veteran wrote, "I learned how to be a better man by watching you every Saturday night." An elderly woman from Texas wrote, "Matt Dillon taught me that justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be right." And perhaps that was his greatest reward, to live on in people's memories, not as a celebrity, but as someone who helped them believe in goodness. On his personal website, the final message he left to his audience, posted just months before his death, was brief, unadorned, and without pretense. Thank you for believing in me through every story about kindness. That was all. But for James Arness, it was enough. A lifetime, if it can make others believe in goodness, is a complete one. Now, every time Gunsmoke airs again, viewers still see Matt Dillon riding toward the horizon, dust swirling behind him, the soft gold of evening sunlight resting on his shoulder. No one knows where he's going, but everyone knows he's riding toward what's right. And somewhere, perhaps, the sound of hoofbeats still echoes, like the slow, steady heartbeat of a generation that once believed in decency. All heroes grow old, but some heroes, even in silence, still make the world believe in goodness. In a world that changes every day, there are still people like him, who live slowly, speak little, but leave behind a light longer than fame. If you've ever met someone like that in your own life, share their story here. And let's keep journeying together through the lives of those who shine quietly and are never truly forgotten. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic journeys into the lives behind the fame. This is Hollywood Biographies, the light, the silence, the legacy.